Today on Between the Lines, how a shared cosmology could transform the world with Nancy Ellen Abrams. Welcome, I'm Barry Kibrick. Nancy and her husband Joel Primack, one of the world's most respected cosmologists, were past guests on Between the Lines. With their latest book, The New Universe and the Human Future, these two cutting-edge thinkers, Nancy, a cultural philosopher, and Joel, a renowned astrophysicist, combined their talents again to present a new picture of the universe filled with critical relevance for our time.
Between the Lines with Barry Kibrick is made possible in part by
the government of Puerto Rico's tourism company, dedicated to the island lifestyle, encouraging viewers to take a break and relax with a good book. Read, rejuvenate. Puerto Rico, the novel island.
I'm a writer today because I was a reader when I was 11 years old, and it was...
You do not need to prove your state of happiness to anybody.
Most of these speeches were as much as a month in preparation.
Characters, the heroes in this book, are seekers of truth in a story that involves a lot of corruption.
You don't get a chance to really talk about what's real, and it's the perfect thing to do.
Nancy, what a pleasure it is to have you back on the show. Although I miss Joel, I'm sorry we couldn't coordinate it so that both of you could be here, but I know what we're going to talk about is going to be mostly the stuff that you really wrote about, a lot of it at least.
Good.
Good. Now, let's start off by telling the viewers what is cosmology so they just get a real good sense of what we're talking about.
Cosmology has two different meanings, and for anthropology, for people who study cultures, what it means is the story of the whole culture. Where did the people come from? How did they originate? How do the gods fit in? What is the meaning of the big picture? That's what a cosmology is in anthropology. But today, scientific cosmology is the science of the study of the entire universe. How did the universe begin? How does it have its? How did it take its structure? What's its nature, and how has it evolved? So the scientific cosmology of today is really about getting the scientific picture right. It's not about us. It's not about our gods. It's not about any of the stuff that traditional cosmology was focused on.
But at the same time, the focus of this book is to take the cosmology that we know about, the universe, its history, its everything, its physics, its entirety, and for us to become more connected with it, because the separation between a common cosmology is a problem. That's what this book is trying to address. Even in the ancient times, whether it was through religion or through, even from pagan times, they had a cosmology that at least they all agreed upon. And one of the things that you want to do here is connect us with our own cosmology.
Exactly. What we're trying to do is to bring together the two concepts of cosmology to give us one coherent way of looking at the universe that is actually based on evidence. There has never in the entire history of humanity been a picture of the universe as a whole that was actually based on evidence. And this is the first time. This is an enormous opportunity for us humans, because we really need something that unites us. And the picture of the universe and the story of our origins, starting in the Big Bang, and how the galaxies formed and how the nature of the galaxies created the kind of matter that we're in, that we're made of, and so forth. This is a story that everyone on the whole planet shares. And if we could just have that, it could just be the beginning of some common ground.
Well, more importantly, as you say, if, I'm going to use your words exactly, we and our fellow human beings do fit into the picture, or if not, we have no meaningful sense of how we should. Without a big picture, we are a very small people. That's kind of an interesting, at first it sounds like a dichotomy, but when you realize it, it's not, because if we do not feel that connectiveness, that is what makes us small. If we feel that connectiveness to the cosmos, and what may even extend beyond it, which would not negate any religion, that makes us feel more valid, more important. And by, as you say so often in here, we are.
It makes us not only feel bigger, it gives us cosmic importance. The fact is we humans could actually affect the entire future of the visible universe. We could play a cosmic role, but we have to start seeing ourselves in the long term. We have to start understanding our distant past in order to understand the potential of the distant future. And right now in our society, people have such a short-term view. So yes, we need to realize how we fit together on the cosmic level for ourselves, but we also need to do it as a way of bonding with each other, because this is really what we all share.
You even go as far as a physicist can go, and I say that with a joke I have with some of my physicists. We never mention the G word or anything like that, I know, because of the connotations, but you do believe that there is a sacredness to this. If we do not see our role as we do on a cosmic level, we could, as you just said, not function as well on a global level as well as even an individual level. It seems like it's all connected.
We humans have enormous problems, and they're global scale problems. And in order to solve global scale problems, you have to have some kind of a global way of cooperating. What is going to tie us together to allow that to happen? What's going to let us achieve at least the connectivity that would let us start to deal with these problems? I really think that this new cosmology, this new picture of how we all originated and how our future could look, is the first candidate, really, the first serious candidate for a globally shared story.
But even with this shared story, you give us some warnings that we need to be careful about. You give an example I thought was beautiful, that when you look at individual human beings, you're always able, even in a small group, to find the very kind, the very courageous, the very helpful, the very loving, all good qualities. Yet when you put people together as what we'll call humanity, you're laughing, you know where I'm going with this, with humanity, whether it's in a bureaucracy, a government, and now I'm thinking on a global scale, you say our best qualities do not come out. So I had that was one of the harder things for me to get a handle on, was how do we think cosmically and yet act on such a small scale that we really are relevant and see ourselves as individuals enlightened and free, and yet still sharing this with others.
Yes, it's very important to understand that there are different sizes in the universe, a huge range of sizes in the universe. From the tiniest size that physics allows, which is called the Planck length, it's 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, really small. It's dictated by the interaction of quantum theory with relativity. It's a theoretical number. From that size all the way up to the size of the visible universe. And we need to understand, first of all, that we humans are actually central. People think of us as small and insignificant compared to the size of the universe, but that's because they're only looking in one direction, toward the large. But if they look toward the small, they discover that we are halfway between the largest and the smallest sizes, which is an interesting place to be in the universe. We are midway, and we couldn't be anywhere else, because if we were much smaller, we would not be made of enough atoms to have the complex consciousness that we have. If we were much larger, then the speed of light would slow down our internal communications, and we wouldn't really be able to think. So intelligent beings like us can really only be at the middle of all possible sizes, and that goes for aliens too. If there are intelligent aliens out there, they're going to be more or less our size, because we are at the sweet spot for complexity. You could be incredibly complex at our size, and still the speed of light will not slow down your communications. So what people need to realize is that at every size scale, the laws of physics actually are different. All the laws are true all the time, but they're not always relevant. So at different size scales, different laws of physics come into control. Now, this is true universally. It's true not just for the sizes of objects, but it's true for the complexity of human interaction, which means that at different size scales in human groups, different rules control how things happen. So the way that human beings behave and feel and think is completely different from the way that groups of human beings, especially large groups, behave. So for example, this whole controversy over whether a corporation is a person. Of course a corporation is not a person. A corporation cannot possibly feel or act or behave in any way like a human being. Now people have a hard time understanding that, so what I like to do is reverse it. We, you and I, all people, are made of elementary particles, but we don't behave anything like elementary particles, because with increasing complexity, new properties emerge and new laws take control, and the laws that govern elementary particles just disappear. And the same thing continues on up. As organizations of humans get more and more complex, the ways that humans behave disappear and completely new principles come into effect. And if we don't understand that this is true, then we will continue to be governed by completely misleading metaphors like this crazy idea that a corporation is a human being. That's ridiculous.
Well, the other thing that I think puts, this is almost a pun, sheds light on the subject, is that the majority of the universe in matter and in energy is what we call dark. And dark doesn't mean black or anything, because as you say, it actually is transparent. It's not reflecting any light, it's because there's no particles there, and it's not a void, it's energy and matter, and it makes up literally, no matter how much we see the beautiful pictures of the universe, it makes up 95% of our cosmic existence. So there's a lot of space out there that, we have no clue at this point how it really affects everything.
Well, actually, this is the amazing thing. We actually do have a clue. And it's true that dark matter and dark energy are probably not the greatest names. They should be called invisible matter and invisible energy. It's just one of these historic things. The first person to name this invisible stuff called it dark, and astronomy is just conservative and they kept it. But it really is totally invisible, and it's invisible not because light is not shining on it, but because it doesn't even interact with light. You can shine light on dark matter, you won't see it. So it's a completely different kind of matter from what we're made of. It's not made of atoms, it's not made of the parts of atoms. So what we do understand, what we really do have a clue about, is how it behaves on the large scale, on the scale of the universe. We understand how dark matter creates the galaxies. Dark matter is most of the galaxy. It's this huge, huge halo that surrounds the tiny little visible part of the galaxy that we see. What we don't know yet is what are the particles that are actually making up the dark matter. But this is what the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland is trying to discover right now. They're trying to make dark matter. And it could, in the next year or two, it could be that we will know what that particle is that makes it the dark matter.
But part of the book does also want us to get a sense of this cosmology so that we can interact with our human species at a better and deeper level. The more we understand that we ourselves are 95% stardust and a few percent hydrogen, mostly water, and yet at the same time, we're so significant. So, and at the same time, we're also made up of mostly nothing. I mean, that sounds really bizarre, but the space between, if they shrunk all the empty space, we would be very small, wouldn't we?
Well, we'd be black holes if that
Am I correct? Okay, even we'd be less than nothing, literally.
Right. Well, it is important to know how the dark matter and the dark energy affect our picture of ourselves, because people really do have this mistaken notion that somehow we humans are just insignificant motes in a universe where no place is different from any other. We live on an average planet of an average star. This entire picture is really wrong. We are made of the rarest material in the universe. We now know, as you said, that most of the energy, the vast majority, 95%, even more, of the universe is this weird dark matter or dark energy. And most of the rest, more than 4%, is just hydrogen and helium, the stuff that came right out of the Big Bang. Hydrogen and helium are what made the first stars. They are what the stars are mostly made of. And then the stars create all of the heavy elements, everything heavier than helium: carbon, hydrogen, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, silicon, all of the elements. The entire periodic table is created inside stars, and then when stars supernova, they blow that stardust out into space, and it just floats through space until it gets picked up. If sometimes it won't get picked up, but can be picked up in the gravitational field of a new forming solar system. So that is where rocky planets come from. There could not have been rocky planets, because rocky planets are mostly made of heavy elements. There couldn't have been that until there were several generations of stars that had blown this stuff out into the galaxy, and enough of it came together in our solar system to make these rocky planets. Without rocky planets, as far as we know, there's no life like us, that's for sure. And what people really need to appreciate is how rare we are. We are not just insignificant motes. We are really the peak of complexity. We are made of the rarest elements, the rarest stuff in the universe, which is this stardust, which really represents a tiny fraction of a % of the content of the universe. But we're completely made of that stuff. 90% by weight we are of stardust. The rest of it's hydrogen in the water in our bodies. So we're made of unusual elements, and we took billions of years to get to the level of evolution that we are now. You can't just toss humans into the universe. Like people say we're just randomly tossed in. That's some existential old view. We took the whole age of the universe to evolve. So there's something incredibly special about us, and maybe other alien life if it exists. But we have a really, you mentioned the word sacred earlier, we have a sacred obligation to protect the rarest thing in the universe, which really is the kind of consciousness that we have.
Well, with that consciousness and that respect for the sacred, one of the other little issues that sprung to mind was your own theory. I'm going to level with you. This was the scientific mediation. And I put right next to it, I said, who can we trust? So if decisions to protect ourselves are so important as a species, who can we trust? As you've given examples, the larger the group, the less the human quality really puts through. Are we going to, I would feel very uncomfortable with a select elite small group making certain decisions based for the humanity. So that's where I tangle with this thing a little bit, because when you used scientific mediation, it almost seemed like you were going to get together in a room, a small group of people, maybe from opposing sides and everything, and somehow mediate our way out of this. So tell me how wrong I am or how right I am. Okay. And I don't mind as long as we get it right.
No problem. Okay, scientific mediation is a proposal to deal with very narrow scientific questions that underlie a specific policy question. So it's not for deciding, it's not for planning the future of the human race or even what the policy should be. It's just to decide what's the scientific truth that this policy decision is going to be based on.
You know, you said something in the book I thought was great. Science is not going to be the last word.
No.
It's just the first word.
It's the first
So
word.
the last word does come back to an enlightened citizenry, literally go back to even our own Constitution, with inalienable rights that can't be taken away from us, so that we can, through a process of enlightenment, make these policy changes that could affect all of existence.
What we really need to focus on is the scale of the next 30 years, which is a completely different way of thinking. And
well, you say, by the way, size matters. in the universe,
Absolutely.
size and scale absolutely matters. And we, as you said before, we act differently. Sizes act differently. If we're not at that right size in space and time, it's absolutely that way.
Yes, and we really need to start thinking about how to solve problems immediately that affect the entire human race. The Earth itself is not in trouble. When people say save the world, they don't mean, I hope they don't mean save the planet, because our planet has been totally frozen as a snowball. It's been bombarded by meteors. It's been steamy all over. I mean, the planet will survive. What we need to preserve are the conditions that our life form can continue in. And our life form is not going to be replaced easily. We are the only intelligent life of our kind that we have ever discovered. We need to preserve our life form. There are people out there who say that the Earth would be better off without humans because we're wrecking it, but I totally, totally disagree with that. We actually have an obligation, I believe, to the universe. We are part of the mind of the universe. The universe has to think through its intelligent beings, because most of the universe is just dark matter and dark energy. There is no way those substances will ever be able to think. They can't be complicated. They're actually quite simple, big but simple. And so they'll never have consciousness really has to be made of stardust beings. It takes the incredible complications of our chemistry to make a brain as complicated as ours. And we need to preserve that. And, you know, in some kind of funny way, the Earth may have to put up with us because it's doing something for the universe as a whole. We are the mind of the universe, and whatever aliens are out there at our level.
You know, Nancy, this type of a conversation is so complex. I'm going to give out your website. Yeah. I know that you and Joel respond to people who write, and even if they don't write, they'll be able to see different things that are built into the whole experience of visiting it. So I want to give that out. And it's real simple. It's just the words new, N-E-W dash universe, UNIVERSE.org. That's the only thing you have to put in there, and they'll be able to get it. But I want to follow up with this one line. Every cosmological metaphor is a double-edged sword.
Cosmologies are absolutely essential because they explain the invisible reality that lies beyond the ordinary world. And every culture known to anthropology has created a cosmology, has created some kind of explanation of the invisible. For the last few centuries, our society has not had a cosmology. We don't know what we're missing. That's the real problem. People don't know what's missing. They don't even appreciate that it matters to have a coherent picture of where you came from and where everybody came from. We are trying to present it as a way of appreciating our central place in the universe, as a way as a really positive interpretation of how we fit in. But there are actually other cosmologists out there who understand the science but are interpreting it in negative and, I believe, dangerous ways. Ways that will turn people away from wanting to learn cosmology or from thinking that it's important. And the example I give in the book is there are cosmologists out there who are saying we live in the worst of all possible universes. Why are they saying this? Because, as I mentioned earlier, in the distant future, billions of years into the future, the distant galaxies will disappear and our galaxy will be alone. What we need to do is use the cosmology that we have now to understand how to join together to save the conditions that will improve life for our descendants. That's the focus we need to take. And the double-edged sword is you can use cosmology to either mislead people or, as in the Middle Ages, to repress people. The medieval cosmology was used by the church and by the kings to hold people down in their place. It was also used in a negative way. Cosmology is just science. How we interpret that to be about us is our choice, and we have to choose to do it in a positive way, and we have to choose, I believe, to do it in a way that's going to help the younger generations.
On that note, I'm ending with your words, our existence matters to the universe. Thank you, Nancy, and your husband, Joel, for showing us what matters.
Thank you, Barry.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and thank you for joining us. Now, before Nancy leaves, I'd like to leave you with these words from the new universe and the human future. What makes sense is to seek passionately to absorb these discoveries, using every cultural tool available to bring home to ourselves this new knowledge of we're and what we humans actually are. I'm Barry Kibrick. Between the vastness of the cosmos and the smallest matter known, we humans exist right in the middle. Seek passionately, and we will discover who we actually are. Thank you so much, Nancy.
If you'd like to get in touch with us, want a DVD or transcript of our show, catch an episode online, or receive our weekly updates, go to www.klcs.org/BTL.
Closed captioning for Between the Lines with Barry Kibrick is made possible by Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, ranked 4th best regional university in the West by U.S. News and World Report. We humans could actually affect the entire future of the visible universe. We could play a cosmic role.
On this episode of Between the Lines, how a shared cosmology could transform the world with Nancy Ellen Abrams. With her book, The New Universe and the Human Future, we see how a new picture of the universe is critically relevant for our times. Of the universe, filled with critical relevance for our time.
Between the Lines with Barry Kibrick is made possible in part by
The government of Puerto Rico's tourism company, dedicated to the island lifestyle, encouraging viewers to take a break and relax with a good book. Read, rejuvenate. Puerto Rico, the novel island.
But I'm a writer today because I was a reader when I was 11 years old, and it was...
You do not need to prove your state.
A lot of it, at least.
Good.
Good. Now, let's start off by telling the viewers what is cosmology, so they just get a real good sense of what we're talking about.
Cosmology has two different meanings, and for anthropology, for people who study cultures, what it means is the story of the whole culture. Where did the people come from? How did they originate? How do the gods fit in? What is the meaning of the big picture? That's what a cosmology is in anthropology. But today,
Today on Between the Lines, how a shared cosmology could transform the world with Nancy Ellen Abrams. Welcome, I'm Barry Kibrick. Nancy and her husband Joel Primick, one of the world's most respected cosmologists, were past guests on Between the Lines. With their latest book, The New Universe and the Human Future, These two cutting-edge thinkers, Nancy, a cultural philosopher, and Joel, a renowned astrophysicist, combined their talents again to present a new picture of
scientific cosmology is the science of the study of the entire universe. How did the universe begin? How does it have how did it take its structure? What's its nature? And how has it evolved? So the scientific cosmology of today is really about getting the scientific picture right. It's not about us. It's not about our gods. It's not about any of the stuff that traditional cosmology was focused on.
But at the same time, the focus of this book is to take the cosmology that
State of happiness to anybody.
Most of these speeches were as much as a month in preparation.
Characters, the heroes in this book, are seekers of truth in a story that involves a lot of
You
corruption.
don't get a chance to really talk about what's real. And this is the perfect to me.
Nancy, what a pleasure it is to have you back on the show. Although I miss Joel, I'm sorry we couldn't coordinate it so that both of you could be here, but I know what we're going to talk about is going to be mostly the stuff that you really wrote about.